Mr. Goodwin? Thank you. We're getting ready to start the meeting. Okay, welcome to College Station City Council Special Council Meeting. This is September 29th, 3:05 p.m. and we've got a couple of presentations here. I'm going to let the city manager make the introduction and and give us the order in which they're going to be presented. So, City Manager Woods.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council, and everyone in attendance. We have both items on the agenda. I'd ask the mayor to open both up. We have on there our Convention and Event Center study. If you remember, when we presented the draft of the document, we said we'd come back once there was a final document. So you guys have the final document, so we've put it on there. If you have any comments, that also may be something we present at a future council meeting, but it's on there for discussion. And then the second item is really, I'd say the main event for the today is the opportunity for the folks from Legends to present on kind of their experience and the potential opportunities in this community. And so if it's good with council, we'll open both of them up, let them do a presentation. You guys have any questions or discussions you may have, and then we're also here for anything as it relates to the study that we've done.
Okay, well, I should have opened them. I'll just read them real quickly. 2.1 is presentation, discussion, possible direction regarding a convention or event center study. And 2.2 is presentation, discussion regarding potential opportunities for a multi-event center. And I think we're going to take 2.2 first, since that's the visitor. And
yeah,
please come forward.
The folks from Legends will come up, and I'll let him give an introduction and roll right into his presentation.
And, I do know that you and your sister and I have crossed paths before. I know that.
Absolutely.
And your grandfather is Norman Borlaug.
Yes, my grandfather is Norman Borlaug, so I have a long history here down in College Station. I myself am not an Aggie, but that's just because they didn't have men's soccer. And I am friends with G, who's been down here forever on the women's soccer team.
Okay.
So officially, my name is Bill Rhoda. I am the Executive Vice President of Business Development for Legends Global, company that's headquartered in New York, but our primary office is in Dallas, Texas, where we have about 65 individuals in the Frisco office, but we have offices all throughout the United States, really all throughout the world. And what I've done today is put together a brief overview of our business opportunities, the responsibilities that we have, the verticals, and a little bit of the experience. When we think, this is just an overview of the type of individuals that work on arena projects around the country. Chris Nations oversees our owner's rep company. Chad Estes is the Chief Revenue Officer. He also has a dual role with the Dallas Cowboys, overseeing all their business operations. Doug Thornton oversees the venue management all throughout the United States for arenas, stadiums, theaters, as well as convention center. Then the balance of the people that you see on here are really from our owner's representation company. Paula Ports actually was involved in the owner's rep management of Kyle Field as well. So people have direct experience on campus on our team as well. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our firm, some of the things that we do, a little bit about project strategy, opportunities and innovation as it relates to multi-purpose venues, and then why Legends Global. So Legends is a company that was started in 2009 with the development of Yankee Stadium and AT&T Stadium. Both of these iconic venues were opening at the same time. The two teams decided that they didn't want to go the traditional route of food and beverage, and they wanted to create their own entity so they could really control that experience. Thus, Legends was born. So we were a company that was created with Goldman Sachs and the two teams to open up those two buildings, primarily focused on hospitality, which is food and beverage. Shortly after that, we decided that there was other opportunities as it related to the development of sports and entertainment venues, and quickly evolved into sales. In 2011, I sold my company, two companies, which was CSL International and CSL Marketing Group. CSL is a company that's done a lot of work in College Station, primarily with TAMU Athletics on all of their venues, on how do you maximize revenue related to those. And then we've layered in other services. During COVID, I think it was 2021, Sixth Street, which is a private equity group headquartered in San Francisco, New York, and Austin, obviously the name Sixth Street, acquired 51% of Legends, and they are the majority owner of Legends at this point. So our partners are Sixth Street, the Cowboys have a piece, the New York Yankees have a piece, and Stan Kroenke has a piece of our ownership. We like to look at what we can do for clients as a complete solution. So we can think about the opportunities to build a building, help with the planning, then we can actually help with the acquisition, the development of it, the sales of it, the food and beverage. We're the only group that in this industry that can help a client, we say, from cradle to grave. Really help plan it, help execute it, build it, operate it. We're the one group that can actually do those types of things. We are a company that's integrated worldwide. Last year, we closed on the company ASM. They're the largest facility operator in the world. We operate over 300 buildings, all types of buildings, stadiums, arenas, ballparks, convention centers, amphitheaters. We have primary operations are in the United States, but we also do operate in Europe, and we do have operations down in Asia Pacific, primarily in Australia. And as you can imagine, with Saudi getting active with the venue development, we actually have operations in Saudi Arabia as well. ASM, who I mentioned we acquired last year, closed on it almost a year ago September, is the industry leader in venue across North America. We operate 7 NFL buildings. Those buildings are things like the Superdome, NRG Complex in Houston, the building in Minnesota for the Vikings, US Bank Stadium. We do the Cardinals building in Phoenix, Jacksonville, and Soldier Field. Those are the NFL buildings that we operate. 86 convention centers, 112 arenas, 60 amphitheaters. That's all venue management. A lot of those, we are a manager on behalf of a municipality like yourself. Some of them we actually own, and some of them we actually take risk on. As I mentioned to you before, we're the one group in the industry that has really all of the verticals from planning to the end to the execution. So from a planning perspective, we help our clients with financial market analysis, project development, valuation, and what that really means is we have clients like yourselves, universities who come to us and say, help us figure out what to build. What makes the most sense? Should it be an arena? Should it be a multi-purpose facility? Should it be a convention center? How big should it be? What is our expectation of revenues and expenses? And how can we finance this type of building? Project development, that's the owner's rep. That's where you come in, you oversee from a schedule perspective and a facility budget, keep the building on time, on budget, helping from the very beginning of these projects, the planning, making sure that the design is appropriate to the budget, construction oversight, and this is really acting as the eyes and ears of an owner, focusing on the architects and the contractors of the building. Some of the projects that we've worked on from a collegiate perspective, we're currently overseeing KU's $400 million renovation to their football stadium. We've worked on Florida State's football stadium renovation. We've been working with the University of OU on the OU Arena project, which I'll talk a little bit about. We oversaw SoFi Stadium, so the $5 billion project for the Rams, the Chargers. Right here, Rogers Field is the baseball stadium in Toronto. We oversaw a $400 million renovation to that project. The Superdome, about a $550 million renovation, where it largely occurred during COVID, was the majority of it. And then we're currently overseeing the Buffalo Bills' $2.3 billion venue that's being built and will open up next year. From a sales perspective, this is really the second vertical that grew out of AT&T Stadium. This is where we go in and we actually execute on behalf of a client to help them monetize a building. Oftentimes we do feasibility studies and we hand them to the clients, and the clients don't really necessarily know how to actually monetize it. They know what our recommendations say, but they don't really know how to execute it. From a sales perspective, we've done all the sales for SoFi Stadium. So we handled all the ticket sales, the PSL sales, the suite sales, sponsorship sales for the Rams and for the Chargers. At the exact same time, we were doing the same thing in Las Vegas for the Raiders at Allegiant Stadium. We've done quite a few collegiate programs. We did all the work on the renovation of OU. We did the work at Notre Dame as it related to the development of the renovation of their stadium and helped with the sales of that stadium. Florida State's renovation, we've handled all the sales for that. Villanova, the renovation of their basketball facility. USC's renovation of the Coliseum, we handled all the sales for that. So we actually bring in, from a white label perspective, the actual sales executives and handle the discussions with the donors and the season ticket holders and help them transition from their old seats to the renovated building. Partnerships, you can see right here our partnerships with Notre Dame. We handle their multimedia. We handle the sales sponsorship for Notre Dame. We did all of the naming rights at SoFi Stadium, all the founding partners at SoFi Stadium, same thing with Allegiant Stadium, LAFC. Right now we have about 60 individuals in this group that are focused on assets for clients all throughout the world. Anything from a F1 contract to a naming rights for a convention center. We're helping people like yourself monetize their buildings. Hospitality, as I mentioned, was really what our company was born on. This is the food and beverage operations. If you've been to AT&T Stadium, all of the food and beverage is our operations. We just took over the food and beverage at the Superdome, operate the Superdome. We do the Tampa Bay Bucks, SoFi Stadium, Yankee Stadium. When we acquired ASM last year, we also took over their food and beverage operations, which is a company called Savor. In total, we have about 125 contracts throughout the country from a food and beverage perspective. Once again, everything from stadiums, arenas, convention centers, amphitheaters. We handle all of Live Nation's amphitheaters around the country from a hospitality perspective. Mentioned ASM, venue management. We are the largest, I'd say, client of Live Nation. That's really the people who put the content in arenas like the ones that we're talking about here today. We are their largest client. So we operate these buildings from an operations, security, marketing, tech, janitorial, security, everything you could think about how you'd operate a building. That's exactly what our company does for the sports and entertainment industry. So when we think about a project, from a delivery perspective, from an owner's rep, our main focus is how do you deliver a project on time and on budget? How do we maximize the guest experience so it helps the clients monetize what that experience is? Really, in projects like this where you have multiple stakeholders, whether it's a city, a county, a university, obviously collaboration with all the stakeholders is key. When you design the buildings, a lot of times architects aren't necessarily operators. They're not necessarily salespeople. So we have that experience from an operational sales perspective. So we step in and really help through the design process to make sure that these buildings are maximized from an operational perspective, from a revenue perspective, from a guest experience perspective. And really working with the design and construction teams, which is not easy because a lot of times they're at odds with each other trying to figure out, why is it over budget? Why is it not coming in on time? So we're kind of the group that sits up on top of them overseeing that. Some of the projects that we've worked on from a owner's rep perspective was the $200 million renovation at State Farm Arena, Fiserv Forum. We're currently working with the Orlando Magic on a $226 million renovation to the Key Center. We did all the work at Barclays Center. Midway Rising, I actually have a case study on that, so I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Intuit Dome, we moved our team right off SoFi Stadium, right across the parking lot to the Intuit Dome, which is the Clippers' $2 billion arena. SoFi Stadium, Highmark Stadium is the name of the Bills, Ball Arena, and then all the work at OU for the Gaylord family facility. Given our experience in Texas and our location in Texas, we know Texas very well. We have worked on about 37 venues in the state, which also includes operations. It includes everything from the food and beverage at FC Dallas's project. We're overseeing the renovation at St. Mark's, a natatorium that was hit by a tornado. So we're overseeing that project. We're working on the $2 to $3 billion renovation of the Kay Bailey Convention Center in Dallas. AT&T Stadium, the Medal of Honor. We were the owner's rep on the Medal of Honor. We're also the operator from a ticket experience perspective. HEB Center in Cedar Park. And then some of the projects that we have from an ASM perspective in San Antonio. We do the food and beverage at the Alamo Dome. We operate the NRG complex, as well as the Boeing Center outside of San Antonio. So Midway Rising is a project that we won a couple years ago, and here we won the rights to redo 50-acre development in the middle of San Diego. It's called the Midway District. Has an existing building which is 58 years old, Pechanga Arena, that was actually operated by ASM. Before we acquired ASM, Legends won the right to take over the whole site, renovate the building or build a new building, and then do development on that site. So what we're planning is it's about 48.5 acres. It's the development of a new 15,000-seat arena that would be done for one of our owners, which was Stan Kroenke, who is the majority owner of this site now. And then we're also doing 4,000 units of housing, half of that which is low income, market rate, and then the other half is market rate. We also have about 250,000 square feet of mixed-use retail, and then a hotel pad that will also be built as a part of this arena complex. The OU Arena is a project that we've been involved with for almost a decade. We've worked with the university, we've worked with the county. This project budget's probably a little light now, as well as the project schedule, as there's been legal delays in this. But right now, the county has committed they have a TIF dollar amount that is going towards the arena project of about $230 million. And then the balance of it will be covered by the private sector, being the university as well as the developer of the arena. We have worked with the university from a strategic perspective to figure out how to kind of put this project together and make it a reality. And we're thinking that this should actually start construction in the next 1 to 2 years. This just is a little bit about how we execute on a project. This is everything from coordinating with all the key stakeholders, resolving early code issues, working with authorities that have jurisdiction, engaging the ADA community, which is important as you think about how do you design a building, building operations and maintenance. These are all key as during the design phase. Timely delivery of a GMP, so it minimizes the risk of these types of projects. When we started our owner's rep business, it was primarily building it on time and on budget. Obviously, when we acquired ASM, we were able to bring on an additional skill set that most people don't have, and it's the true operations of these buildings. So as we get into the design of these buildings, we're really to help from an operations and facility program design review. Once again, it's maximizing, what that building looks like, minimizing the operating costs, making sure we're not building a building that has 9 levels, that when you think about how do you staff it, we have to staff all these people on game day, increasing our game day costs, really driving the architects on an efficient design that makes the most sense for a given market. When we think about what makes a project successful, obviously when you have a project that has multiple stakeholders, it's a project governance. How do you get a team together? How do you establish a project control group, people who can help make decisions? The one thing that can kill any project is the lack of ability to make decisions. When you don't make decisions, it drives the price up, the schedule out, and it's something that just doesn't work on most of these projects that are multi-million-dollar projects. So these are some of the key metrics that we typically try and make sure that we enforce on all the projects. When you get into the middle of a project, obviously project budget management's key. How do you keep a project on time and on budget? And these are the types of things that we do from the very beginning of the planning to developing the capital stack to overseeing the construction budget, to the final closeout. These are all very critical that are really tracked on a daily basis. A lot of times we work with the major financial institutions in this country, whether it's Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan. They typically come to us to help with the planning on it as well as the oversight of it. from a budget, from a timeline perspective, this is really kind of a generic key phases, milestones of what the types of people that are involved in these types of projects. So it's creating the vision, planning feasibility, negotiation, permitting and design, construction and operation. Obviously, the size and magnitude of a building impacts how long this could be. If you're designing and you're constructing an MBA building, it's typically a 5 to 6 year time frame. Those are buildings that are 650 to 850,000 square feet. When you go smaller to a building that would fit this market and this university, you're probably design of a solid year, year and a half, and construction of 2 to 2.5 years. So it still ends up being, 3 to 4 year time frame that these types of projects occur over. And then you can see the type of professionals that are typically involved that we typically oversee: project management, financial and market advisors, legal advisors, the architects, engineers, contractors, operators, and then, we call AHJs, the authorities having jurisdictions. It would be people like yourself, permitting, code issues, all of those things which are critical to the success of a building. When we think about projects that have risk, it's site selection. What type of site are we picking? How easy is it to do construction? Is there ground issues? Is there water that we need to be worried about? Scope creep, developing what a scope is, and then having everybody start to add to that. Obviously, we call that scope creep, and that's what causes cost overruns. And then market impacts. These are all the things that we've been seeing in the market, whether it's tariffs, competition in the marketplace. When we get into some of the major markets and we see that there's a very lack of labor or materials, that's when you start to have cost impacts on a project of this magnitude. This is just a typical dashboard KPI that when we're involved in a project, our partners, our owners have access, full transparency to budgets, timelines, sales revenues, what's being required of people on a daily basis. We make sure that we keep all of our partners up to speed on a daily basis of where the project is at all times. When we think about these new buildings, a lot of it's focused on fan engagement. Wayfinding, how do you monetize the building? What's the wayfinding approach? Future-proofing and adaptability. These buildings used to last 60, 70, 80 years. We're now seeing that a lot of them are only lasting 25 to 30. A lot of that also has to do with the location of the building. When the building is in a good location, the optimal location, you tend to see people renovate these buildings more and more. And the key to renovating these buildings is to make sure that you have some future-proofing and adaptability to them. A lot of that has to do with square footage. So making sure that things you're designing can be changed out 10 years later. Today, the tech budget of these buildings is much more significant than it was 10, 15 years ago. A lot of times the LED boards, those buildings are now, those products are changed out every 5 to 10 years. Whereas before those things sat, for 15, 20 years. So there's a lot of technology in these buildings that needs to be thought about how to handle that from the beginning. Sponsorship platforms, we're thinking through these things on a daily basis. How do you monetize it from the scoreboard to how do you integrate it into a mixed-use district and take those opportunities outside into the district to outside of the bowl, LED, all of these things have a major impact on the success of a building as well as the cost. One of the things that's changed, and obviously you guys know this in this market with Kyle Field and the other buildings, is premium offerings. Suites, loge boxes, club seats, areas for donors, areas for season ticket holders to go to and mix and mingle. These are all areas that are critical to the success of buildings and helping drive the revenue that helps pay for these types of buildings. I mentioned the tech stack. We're seeing a very different approach to technology as it relates to food and beverage. You've probably been in airports where you have the Amazon Go. You walk in, put your credit card in, just walk out with what you want. We're seeing the exact same thing in stadiums and arenas, kind of food halls, markets. It's a lot of the technology. Here's the bottom one in the middle is the Mass Gin, where you just walk up, you put your products on, and it's automatically calculated. We have merchandise shops at Yankee Stadium that have RFID. So you walk up with your bag, you dump everything into this little bin, and then it automatically calculates about 10 seconds later, you pay and walk out. So it limits the labor, which limits the labor expense. And then at the same time, from a guest experience perspective, that transaction time is like much quicker. They can get in and out. We just thought, we did the merchandise at the PGA of America for the Ryder Cup. So yesterday, we ended up with sales of around $50 million. A lot of it had to do with the technology of getting people in and out of a 60,000 square foot merchandise tent that we had at the Ryder Cup, moving people as quick as possible, really as many transactions per minute as we can get to make that experience good. One of the other things that we think about a lot is how do these buildings integrate into mixed-use districts? The top left is the Star. If any of you have been up to Frisco, that's the 10,000-seat indoor football stadium that the Cowboys practice in. Frisco Independent School District also does their high school football games in there. It's a 93-acre site integrated with, we're sitting close to $2 billion of development that's occurred on that site. Jerry actually has more money in the Star than he actually has in the AT&T Stadium with the amount of development that's gone on here. But these are things that really, the stadium itself, driving people to the plaza, really helps activate the footfall that helps drive those restaurants, that mixed use, the hotels, the office space. The upper right's the Midway District that I talked about that we're designing as we speak. The one in the bottom middle is that's AEG, that's LA Live, which was one of the first that put together a mixed-use district right in the middle of an arena complex with Staples Center, which is now Crypto. One on the left is SoFi Stadium, which is a 300-acre development in Inglewood that we helped them think through with the strategy and help them monetize from a sponsorship perspective. This is just some of our lessons learned from other sports projects. It's talking about the governance. It's critical to engage contractors early as we start to think about the pricing of these, finalizing development agreements early. A lot of this has to do with early, making sure the strategy's in place, the planning's in place, that everybody's aligned on the goals and the objectives, making sure that those people that are involved with the operations of the building, whether it's merchandise, whether it's food and beverage, whether it's sales, that they're sitting at the table when the building's being designed so they can all think through those things as early as possible. Typically, we also, engage the sales strategy well before the actual construction starts so we can help, actually modify the design as we see sales going up or down. That's, that's a quick overview of what we do, the types of projects. This is a summary slide of why Legends. I don't know if we need to get into that at this point. I'll open it up for Q&A for any questions you guys may have on our experience and help you think through this project.
Why don't we start with you,
Well,
Ms. McElhaney?
I'm hoping that we can diverge from our usual go down the line and ask questions. This meeting today is something that I'm very excited about. I know I'm not the only one that's had the opportunity to ask some questions about the project as a whole that may be a possibility. And Legends is a large critical piece of that, but nothing happens in a vacuum. And I'm wondering if we could have Hunter introduce the concept as a whole, kind of so everyone can understand. I know this is out of order, Mayor, but the whole goal of having this discussion like this is so that we can kind of see the possibilities and I guess eventually figure out if we want to move forward. But there are a lot of moving pieces to it, and I would really like to make sure we have the whole picture.
I have no objection to Mr. Goodwin being a spokesperson. I'm not
And
sure.
then I have tons of questions, but
I know we have tons of questions, but we do need to look at a big picture.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Melissa. I think this is what you want maybe is that I think I've been involved now with the tourism side of College Station, Brian, for 20 years, 2 decades. And I owe you both an apology. I wasn't excluding y'all. We ran out of time. So sorry I didn't get over to say hi to you and Mark. And, we've had two pretty strong goes at a convention center. The city acquired the site at Chimney Hill. They later sold that. That led to a whole kind of change in direction. There's most recently been a Hunden Partners a consultant study that's been done. Our tourism committee has exhaustively looked at that. And really I guess from a theme standpoint, the consistent thing that kept coming back is there are some challenges in our market because we're not a Houston, a Dallas, we're not a major MSA. However, there's a lot of opportunities here. And I think that you have to be a little more strategic, a little more pragmatic. You can't just isolate and spend $100 million on a convention center, another $100 million on an exhibition center, another $100 million on a sports center. So really, I think something you really begin to see as you look at markets that are similar in scale and size to Bryan-College Station is a multi-purpose venue. And as you begin to look at the needs, I think these are my words, I'll own them, a very intimidating setting as you get filmed for every word you say. But to me, if the City of College Station and the university don't have a desire to do this stops today, honestly. However, call me a eternal optimist. In listening to 20 years of this discussion and debate, I do see a clear path. I do see a clear vision. I get nothing out of this. I'm wasting 2 hours not wasting. I am giving up 2 hours of my day to be paid to be here because I believe so much in this project. And so it was myself that reached out to Bill's team. A funny quick story there. The logic behind it was simple. Find the best, right? And as I was looking around at Oakview and some others, it became abundantly clear that the best in the business is Legends. And I reached out through a relationship of a former Dallas Cowboy by the name of Dat Wynn, and I said, hey man, could you introduce me to this group? He was kind enough to facilitate a call with Chad Estes and Bill. And anecdotally, kind of a funny comment, as I went into my diatribe and I was selling them on why should you think about Bryan-College? We're not Saudi Arabia, we're not big markets. Bill kind of politely paused me and said, Hunter, my grandfather is a guy you might have heard of, Norman Borlaug, and I've only been to College Station about 5,000 times, and I love the place. So stop selling Bryan-College Station. So I think that there just happened to be a great connection there with him. And so the reason they're here today is just to really have some free dialogue with y'all. As I started with and I'll end with, if you have no will or desire to do this, personally, I think it's a shame. I think it's very short-sighted. I think this is a visionary project. I think it's something that should hopefully, when we leave here today, all of you think big. I think there's a true opportunity, and I think as evidenced by the presentation that Bill just presented, best-in-class partner right here in front of you. Hopefully there's open dialogue, but I think that is kind of the history of how we got to this point. I've had separate engagements with many of you to answer the questions that I feebly felt like I was appropriately educated to answer, but I think there is a really good foundational base here. I hope there is a will and a desire, and I hope today you can get all your questions answered to at least move this in the right direction and hopefully get to a point of a thumbs up or a thumbs down. That sufficient, Melissa?
No.
Okay.
So that's
What
a
else?
start.
So I know that that you're very clear that it would be in order to be successful, and I think anyone that's listening to this would agree, it would be A&M, Bryan-College Station, probably even the county, and not putting anybody on the line or hooking anybody into anything permanently. In your opinion, where might be a good place to site such a center?
So there have been, thanks for putting me on the spot. There have been some very tentative discussions, and I don't want to misrepresent anyone, about Hensel Park. I think that if I misstep, I'm sure I'll be harshly corrected. But if you look at the 120 plus acres that are underdeveloped, that are bound on three sides by Bryan, and we happen to have, I think, all the ability to serve it from an electric utility standpoint, and we get the sales tax here in College Station. You look at it logically and you start to compare it to some of the pictures that we saw today of mixed-use development. Really, in my opinion, the only mixed-use development we have in this community is Century Square, which just happens to abut Hensel Park. You've got essentially Texas Avenue as a boundary to the east. You've got College Avenue as a boundary to the west. About 80 per linear feet of Hensel Park is actually City O'Brien, COB to the left, COB to the right, COB to the north. They've announced a desire to have further development there. There's roughly, depending on what numbers you look, somewhere between 25,000 to 30,000 students that will be living in Northgate, which is immediately contiguous and across the street. So it's a wildly appropriate location. And I think my understanding is that why would there be an interest in that location other than the obvious geographic things I just talked about, is one, it would be highly accretive to what exists there today. You have probably the most dense proliferation of retail, hospitality assets, multifamily assets, true mixed use. And obviously, if we do something that's transformational and drives demand and consumer demand and brings in people from outside our community to spend, that's highly accretive to their balance sheet because of the way some of those leases are structured, as I understand it. So I do think that is a great blank canvas. I know not to put others on the spot, but
Sorry.
I've probably had, I don't know, 100+ hours, if not more. Dr. Schaefer and I have had a lot of conversations over the years when Mike Young was president here about what can we do with Hensel, right? Today, it's an eyesore. It's underutilized. It's literally the hole in the donut. If you look, take yourself up, 2,000 feet and you look down on our community, there's density surrounding it on all four sides. It's right between the two cities. It's literally in the halfway dividing line, and it's across the street from the campus. And just east of a third, if not maybe a half of our student population. It's a great logical location, great ingress and egress access from a traffic standpoint, and would be highly impactful to both the city of Bryan and the city of College Station. And it's literally connected to the university. So a very highly appropriate location, very similar to what you've seen in a lot of these pictures that they're having to go to a greenfield site and start from scratch. And as I was tying it back to Dr. Schaefer, highly underutilized. It's not a park that any of us would go to today as a destination, and I think this project could be an impetus to actually making it turn into something meaningful for the community along the lines of Parkland.
Thanks. When hearing about this of the tourism committee and different avenues, to me, the synergy that location offers, it gives the opportunity for A&M to participate in a very meaningful way. In ways that we haven't discussed or explored. It gives Bryan the tie-in and College Station. And I think, like you said, that site combined with the legendary Legends Global Event, everything management, it makes it worth a conversation. So thank you, Hunter.
You bet. Good.
Probably need to have some questions for Bill as well. Mr. Yancey, I think it's your turn.
Thank you,
I
Mayor.
assume you want to talk to Mr. Rhoda first.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, very much. Mr. Rhoda, very impressive presentation. When you guys acquired or merged with ASM Global, y'all became the largest company in the world of your type, did you not?
Correct. Venue management services to the industry, yes.
And you guys do these kind of projects with governments, with universities, with combinations thereof, all the time in many different configurations all over the United States. Is that a fair statement?
I'd say 90% of our clients are municipalities and colleges, public agencies. That's correct.
What would you say is driving this? Why is OU doing what they're doing? Why is Alabama building the Saban Center? Why is this happening across the country?
Well, number one, a lot of these buildings are old. They don't necessarily have the fan amenities, the revenue potential, as well as the ability to accommodate the events, the types of events that they could. So that drives it from the first perspective. When you're looking at it from a collegiate perspective, that industry has changed dramatically, and the need to drive revenue is critical. And then, there's a lot of communities that understand the development and the operations of these types of venues can help from an economic development perspective.
And I've noticed, thank you for that, and I've noticed that in looking at your contract footprint and the way you guys organically grow within a community, true or false, y'all will start out with one anchor facility someplace, but then you're like absolute maestros at coordinating event activity so that people go to this event and then they go take in a concert later that night or the next day, and you keep them in town and you keep them engaged. And speak to that if you would.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, the key on a lot of these multi-purpose venues is driving heads and beds. Is to really help communities drive that economic activity, to have the patrons come in and spend as much time in the community, in the building, in the mixed-use development, spending dollars, driving tax revenues.
And you'll reach out and contract with, on an episodic basis or on an ongoing basis, other underutilized venues. You've mentioned amphitheaters. We happen to have one here that I, as one member of council, think is underutilized. Might that programming of entertainment events include something at this facility, but then taking in a concert at Wolfman Creek Amphitheater, or doing something at the City of Bryan's Legends Event Center, and basically maximizing the capability and capacity of these facilities around the anchor?
Yeah, from an operational perspective, that makes sense to us. So when you look at most communities we go into, we already have an existing relationship because it works from a staffing perspective. So typically when we go into a new community, we do look for those other opportunities to how you can build those synergies and bring more content into a marketplace.
Also noticed you guys, I mean, it could be said that the Dallas Cowboys are just one tenant in AT&T Stadium, right? How many events, if we did something like this at Hensel Park, how many events per year would you experientially, as a pro in this field, say, we made it, we did it, we succeeded? How many events per year?
So obviously, a lot of that is different market by market size, building type. AT&T Stadium, we have the 8 Cowboy games, and we probably have about 25 other major ticketed events. The other thing about buildings like that is we're also thinking through how do you monetize and activate that building on non-game days. So if you've been to AT&T Stadium, we're driving catered events. We're driving people who just want to go tour the building, who want to go take their son and throw football on the football stadium. So we're thinking through things that are also non-ticketed. For a building of this magnitude in this community, obviously there'd be a tenant, primary tenant, which would be Texas A&M, men's basketball, women's basketball. You have things like volleyball and wrestling, other things that can take place in here. Concerts, family shows, truck shows, conferences, conventions. I would think you'd be at a minimum 100 to 125, event nights that this type of building would be used.
And there's a quality of life perspective to that, is they're not in that local residents participate heavily in those various forms of entertainment. It's about bringing people in from outside of town, of course, but
It's
the
also
quality of
about
life for your local
creating a
residents is
community asset. I agree.
Okay, those were the softballs. Now for some high heaters. If we did this deal, and I know we don't know deal points yet, but just your gut shot, who would own the land when the dust had settled on the contract?
I'd say there's no cookie cutter way on how these are approached, but typically in a public-private partnership, the land would continue to be owned by who owns the land, and the building would be owned by the municipality.
So the improvements would be owned by one scenario is the improvements would be owned by the municipality. The dirt would continue to be owned by, in this case, Texas A&M University System, and there would be some sort of dirt lease arrangement.
Yeah, long-term lease, correct.
And the financing mechanism for something like that, who builds this large arena?
I'd say every successful project like this is a combination. It's a public-private partnership.
Performance guarantees. Do you guys offer any kind of performance guarantees, or is your performance guarantee a partnership or an implied contractual one in that you're tied to the wagon, and if it doesn't succeed, you don't succeed?
That's typically how it is. And from a performance perspective, or even from the, these deals are all very different. The one thing we're always asked about is Moody Center. University of Texas has a $400 million building that somebody paid for. Austin is very different. I mean, you all have been there, and Austin has the ability to do 50, 60 concerts a year. So economics are very different from each of those markets. That's why I think the key is on all of these buildings and these types of markets, it's a public-private partnership.
4 quick ones. We're in possession of a study from Hunden Partners that says we're missing out on millions in business and dozens of events annually. As a subject matter expert in this field, do you agree with their assessment?
I haven't read it, but I would assume that would be the case.
Can I, as one member of council, do from a taxpayer risk mitigation standpoint to make sure that the taxpayers, what can we do? How should we be thinking? Put your elected official hat on. How do we protect our taxpayers?
Well, I think in an eventual deal, there would be a limit or a cap on the type of exposure or a cap on the type of investment, as well as, figuring out roles and responsibilities for the operations.
And multi-government partners, are you guys scared of agreements like that? And were we to enter one, wouldn't that mitigate taxpayer risk across all of the participating governments in a centrally located facility?
Yeah, having multiple partners would, and we're used to those type of agreements.
My last question, I thought there was more acreage than that, Hunter. I thought there was like 170 out there. Would this take down that entire site, or would there be room for parks and green space and something that we, almost like New York Central Park, but with a mixed-use development right in the center of it, excellent entertainment, but something we could be proud of visually, aesthetically, and from a conservation standpoint as well?
No, the arena itself is typically a couple acres. So if you're talking 170 acres, you have plenty. Obviously, you need to plan for parking, but in the middle of an existing mixed use, you can think about how you kind of share on some of those assets. And then, the idea of a plaza and that green space, I think, is critical to the success. So I think designing a building and how it fits into that space can help you enhance that existing park space.
Excellent presentation. I got 1,000 other questions, but before Mayor cuts me off, thank you for taking the time to come here today.
No, Mr. Yancey, I know you got 1,000 other questions, and we'll hear them, and along with many others. Mr. Schaefer.
No, I think at this point I would just say thanks for being here, for making the presentation. I appreciate both you and Hunter bringing it. Bob's asked several questions, a couple of which I wanted to ask about in terms of the way these things work. I will be happy to listen to my fellow council members at this point, Mayor.
Mr. White.
Thank you so much. This is very exciting. You mentioned that a lot of the partnerships that you work with, 90% of them are municipalities. Is that correct?
Correct.
Are a lot of them within the size of Brazos Valley? I mean, you mentioned and compared Austin. I've lived in Austin for a while. It's apples and oranges. Do you see the market available in the Brazos Valley to put on something like this?
I do, and when we operate in a lot of venues, a lot of markets just like this, even throughout Texas. We took over the Waco Convention Center, have a long history in Waco, Midland, so a lot of smaller markets in Texas we operate in.
Yeah, I actually am very familiar with your HEB Center in Cedar Park. Mm-hmm. Very nice facility, very successful facility, so I truly appreciate that. So you mentioned that you had support from Bryan, City of Bryan. Once again, I think this is a tri-party type of deal, so we definitely need A&M on there. All their court sports would be there. And then we would market it to conventions, because I'm a firm believer that we're right in the middle of this triangle with the San Antonio, Houston, and the Dallas area. I think we can attract a lot of those type of events with the right facility. So do you see that in your mix of events? I know you talk concerts, I know you talk sports, theater, but are you talking, we talked about a convention center. Do you see a convention market coming to this facility?
Yeah, I think it'd be something we'd definitely have to think about, and how do you integrate some of that convention space into the arena complex. Obviously, you can use the arena floor and the concourses and the meeting rooms, but we'd think hard about how you do it to maximize the potential flexibility. I also think being in a community that's also driven by a university, there's a lot of needs for that type of convention space.
Do we have the hotel space in our community to handle large groups like this?
Well, you probably don't have the hotel space to compete with Dallas and Houston and San Antonio on those types of trade shows, but obviously there are quite a few that do still travel throughout the state that go to smaller markets. And by the way, this type of venue also would likely drive more hotel development.
I would definitely see that. Tell me, is our airport, which is limited to the number of airlines coming in, is that something that we can overcome? Is that something that we need to work with them on in order to prepare for this type of venue?
Obviously, airport access and hotel inventory is important as it relates to conventions and trade shows. As it relates to the traditional multi-purpose concerts, family shows, it's not necessarily something that's critical.
Okay. I'm very excited. I think this is a great opportunity for our community. I think it's something that would benefit College Station, Bryan, A&M. I'm very excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you. Okay, so I feel like I am behind everybody, and I'm not sure if it's just because, who knows why. I was on vacation or we're just not part of some of whatever's been talked about. What we're talking about here exactly, I think Melissa was trying to kind of get to the bottom of it, because it was kind of said, hey, this is who we are. Hunter did a good job of trying to explain his vision on it, but what we're talking about is essentially building a new Reed Arena and tacking on a convention center to it. In pretty rough terms. Am I off there?
Well, I don't know if it'd be building an arena and tacking a convention center, or how do you build something that can accommodate both uses to the best of its ability?
Sure. But essentially, I'm just like,
yes,
that's what we're talking about. Okay. So we have Reed Arena now. And so building a new arena, why would that immediately drive our ability to get things that we haven't had in 20 years? Because we used to have concerts come through all the time. We don't anymore. Reed Arena sells out when the basketball team is good, otherwise it doesn't. So I'm not poo-pooing this. I'm just saying, like, what exactly is just a new arena going to drive these things from your perspective, having been in this business, or?
So Reed Arena, from a collegiate perspective, is a good collegiate building. I'd say from a multi-purpose ability to drive concert content is probably not.
Right.
It wasn't designed for that. And these buildings have changed over the last 20, 30 years significantly. Just from the load perspective of what a concert takes to load in and load out, and from a rigging perspective is totally different. Than I assume the majority of the shows that are out there in the marketplace probably couldn't even be rigged over at Reed Arena.
Yeah, perhaps not. It was just a time in my life growing up here. I saw WWF, and then I saw Garth Brooks and Matchbox. Like, that died. Yeah. And so I guess I'm more confused as to why it would immediately come back. But I can see what you mean, that perhaps just the market has passed on from whatever that is. But, citizens will be like, Reed Arena is perfectly fine. Like, why invest in something different? And so it's like, it's a selling point, something I'm trying to get to the bottom of. It was a fantastic presentation, and I have no decision in my brain yet. I'm just like, those are the first things that come to mind. Just like, outside of it being shiny and new, what is it that we're doing here? But I love the idea and the location for sure. I think at this moment I don't have any more questions, but I just kind of wanted to, because I know, like, the project in Norman is very interesting. It still feels like this project here will be one of the more unique if we all partner together, just based on the two cities right there, A&M being a very, it's one of the biggest sports brands in the world for Adidas, but it still feels kind of like what Hunter was saying, very untapped in ways too. We have great name recognition, and I think if volleyball or basketball won a national championship this year,
or football.
But football wouldn't play here is what I mean. Like when Johnny helped build Kyle Field, volleyball winning a national championship would, spur a lot more interest. Same with basketball and things like that. So just kind of, you don't have the answers to this, but it's just the idea of everyone working together for this common goal and how it would all split up will be very interesting. See how we all suss that out. But thank you for being here, and thank you for the presentation. Wonderful.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Mr. Smith?
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for being here. It's apparent that Legends is the people to do this with if we're going to do this, and the ideas are exciting. One of the things, it's a lot of money. It a partnership that's going to be difficult to pull off, I think. Although I think everyone's interested, but it's just the more complicated it gets, the harder that kind of stuff happens. And I really, really want to know what the citizens of College Station think about this. I mean, I know there are some people on home game weekends, it's like, let me just get the food that I need and hunker down in my house because I don't want to, I want that can happen. I'll see the flyover, but that's fine. Or I'll go out to eat because there's no one in the restaurants during the game. But so there's some. I'm curious about how the citizens of College Station are going to feel about this. It's a lot of money, and we get looked at when we spend a lot of money, and so that's the big thing to me. I think we can pull it off. I think we can do it, and if we're going to do it, let's do it right.
You have any questions? Just a commentary. I guess it's back to me. I would say that there's a lot of enthusiasm in the city of College Station to do something like this if the pieces can be pulled together. And if you'll go back one slide, if you could, I don't know if you control that. That very first bullet point is what I think Councilmember Smith was talking about. I think the pieces are definitely here, absolutely. Give me some idea of how and who pulls that together besides this city council, because we've talked about the county, we've talked about the university system, we've talked about athletic department at Texas A&M and probably several others, City of Bryan. How do we put that together? And obviously our city staff has some experience in pulling these kinds of teams together to get certain kinds of things done that are, let's say, more traditional municipal responsibilities and opportunities, whether it's fire protection or whatever it is. And certainly Hunter spoke eloquently about his enthusiasm for this. He's a person who really knows how projects are put together along with our staff. But it would seem to me that an organization like yours needs to come in pretty early and be identified. How does that happen?
So I would say that's fair, is the earlier you start with the people who are eventually going to be involved is critical. We've typically come in and acted as like a pre-development manager to really help from a strategic perspective with the contractor, with an architect, put together a concept design. Right now there's like no cost, there's no program. You have to have somebody who comes in and helps figure out where's the money, how does it get financed, how does it operate, who are the responsibilities, what is the lease structure with the tenants, Texas A&M. It's the exact role that we played at OU, where we were working with the city, the county, the OU Foundation, as well as athletics. We kind of sat in the middle and kind of played quarterback to all of that to get it to the point where then the county took over and kind of is pushing the project forward now.
Mm-hmm. So it's a county, it's not Norman the city, it's the county.
It's both. I think it's Norman City. It's the city of Norman where the building sits. It'll be the county where the TIF dollars are generated from.
Well, I think I've learned enough from the Hunden study that I think the financing is doable. There's a lot of moving parts to it. A lot of different people are going to need to be engaged in that. I agree with a number of questions that Mr. Yancey raised about risk mitigation, protecting the taxpayers, protecting the city financial stability, which I think we enjoy here in College Station. So I think those sorts of questions are going to have to be worked through, but I think I'm most interested in, not concerned, I'm most interested in how we go about getting the foundation that you're going to need, or somebody like you. You can't do anything if we don't have that number one sort of figured out. You got to have a lot of confidence in that governance structure and the different people, the different entities that are involved in that. So Hunter talked a little bit earlier about some of those pieces. I'm interested in seeing how we might move that forward. I guess I'm sort of thinking out loud about how we leverage the talent we have in the city and our own economic development operations, our own city staff, in engaging the other partners that need to be at the table, because we can't do this by ourselves, as Hunter says, if the city's not committed, and I think the city could be easily committed, but we need the other key partners there as well, equally committed, and be ready to make their own commitments along with the city. I guess maybe I asked the city manager a little bit, since he's been in project development in the private sector before he came here. How do we do this?
Well, one, obviously, is a city, and one of the reasons we paired the other item on here is we've talked about, in theory, we've called it a convention center, but call it whatever you want, right? A big facility. I'll say for my own part, although obviously in any of these situations, I'm not the one who makes the decision, but I think it at the very least, to me, it makes sense to look at something like this, certainly with the other partners. Because if there's one thing I know, and you hear it from me all the time, and much less exciting projects, and I know they deal with the same things in the city of Bryan, at Brazos County, it's that we just can't afford to build something that isn't used all the time anymore. And I think in a community like ours, we're very fortunate. I mean, it's one of the things that anybody who ever comes here to visit me, it's incredible that we have A&M's facilities and have an ability to access it. And so any opportunity, I think, when you're going to undertake something that does have some risk, all of these have risk, both from a capital investment, but certainly from an operational department, to spread that out and then everybody else kind of enjoy, I think is good. And I think, as has been stated, the way you kind of do it is this is a first step for us, right? So you're our governing body, so it's to see, is this something you want us to start to explore? There's other people that have been mentioned. We have a willing partner, certainly in the private sector, and others out in the private sector in our community. So I think kind of the first things we would do is start to go around and give the other potential partners the opportunity to see where they stand. And so if we get that kind of same reaction from those folks, and then we sit down and we start going into exactly what he talked about, which is figuring out what this looks like, what that may look like. And ultimately that first bullet, I agree with too. It's also going to be set up once we start to figure out what is the cost, what is the programming, who's going to bear that cost. Because, I mean, in general, I think everybody knows, depending on who is putting in the most, both capital and operations, they're going to have a different place in that governance structure than everybody else. But then trying to make sure that you spread that out to where everybody feels like they're a part of it. So I think, to me, the logical step is if the council is interested in pursuing this and going forward, is how do we go ask our other partners in the community? And again, we've got some good people already to ask that question. And then once we do, I think you start with an initial kind of governance structure to say, hey, this is what we all agree on in a way to go explore this, and then you kind of work that process until you get to a point of this is what the brass tacks is, and this is how we think we finance it, both from a governmental perspective, if there's capital involved. I personally always like people who stand to lose their own money involved in government projects. That's a good person to have advising you, because they tend to advise you in ways to make money. And then we know from things we've done and other people we have in the community that there's also ways, both from a standpoint of how we use our jurisdictional powers from a taxing perspective and what they can do at the state to potentially fund some of this stuff. So, when you see these hundreds of millions of dollars, those are real numbers. But what we need to do also is chip away at what opportunities are there that aren't going to be borne by either the taxing entities, so ultimately the taxpayers, or the other public entity. So I think we can go through all of that, and if you get to that point, and then you can come back and kind of say, this is what we're really looking at, and then you kind of go back around to where you started, and you go to all the partners and get that firm yes, and then we go from there. So my recommendation now would be is if council sees this as a viable option and something you want to explore, that then we work with the folks from Legends and our community partners to try to get similar type discussions going and go from there. Also, I saw Mayor Gutierrez come in. Everything is named Legends or Midtown. I don't know why we just luck out with us and Brian, but maybe that's a sign that these guys are in here.
You know, actually, I don't know, I didn't count how many times you used the word monetize, but it was central to your message on almost every screen. And I go back to Mr. Wright's concern. I think one of the keys is you really need a group that knows how to market and stays with it and has a share of the proceeds from filling this space up. I don't think, with all due respect to the athletic department or College Station or anybody, we really know how to do those kinds of things, nor do we have the network and the connections globally to attract those attractions here that will motivate you to get out of your chair and go to it during the week when it's not a basketball game or some regular user of the facility. So I think it's important to have a long-term view that you probably need to have an event management company that stays with you over a period of time. One of the thoughts in response to the city manager's comments, first of all, I'd say you got a very positive, I didn't hear Mr. Schaefer say much, but he certainly sounded like he endorsed the idea that I think the city College Station is ready to take a look at this. I don't think this council has any objections to moving down the road with a pretty clear understanding that we're going to have to put some resources into this, and we're going to have to take some position in that governance structure that'll be meaningful and significant. But I would think that we've got an economic development department. We've got economic development expertise to bring it part of the way along with very strong consultants. But you've also got a subcommittee of this council that should be very active in helping guide that dialogue along with the other potential partners. And I think some of the partners have been here, or some of them have been here and gone today. I hope that they will be open to those discussions, and I think that's the direction that I hear this council wanting to go. Any other comments from council members?
I never got to ask questions.
Yeah, please. You want to have more questions? You have another 1,000 questions?
I didn't ask questions.
Oh,
I
you
just
didn't?
got an intro.
Oh, okay, well, then we come right back to you.
Sure. Now, so municipalities have got to be one of the worst things to deal with from an outsider coming in. We've got all these rules we have to follow. How have you seen this structured in other municipalities? How does the relationship work when you've got the public, private, and even multiple public entities coming together? How have you seen that work functionally?
You know, very similar to the funding of these buildings, it's never the same. You know, a lot of times it's the parties working together. I think that's why it works for a private group to come in and operate this and take the type of operational risk, because then it's not on the individual government groups to do that. And I think, you know, municipalities, governments aren't the best, as the mayor said, at operating and booking these types of things. So that's why we have so many of those types of relationships, even where there's multiple jurisdictions tied to one project.
Does it typically wind up where the private partner how does the municipality stay tied into the day-to-day operations? Do they step back and just take a board or governance type seat in the operation?
Typically, it's step back, take a board or governance, you know, full transparency on what's happening at the building. You know, they have operational oversight, and obviously when they put money into a building, that's key. A lot of times, there's actually authorities that are put together. So in the case of NRG down in Houston, there is a stadium authority that is actually our client that's made up of city and state folks. So that oftentimes, when there's multiple jurisdictions, there's a separate authority, and governance of that authority is made up by individual members of each of those jurisdictions.
Okay, so when you guys come in, I actually was Googling the stadiums you were saying. I'm not very familiar with what some of them are. Do you, obviously you work through the opening of it, and then you guys will manage the food, beverage, the entertainment, the ticketing. What do you not do? Is there any piece of it that is not covered by the operations piece that you offer?
Not really. We don't do the content. We book the content, but that's Live Nation and AEG are the promoters. But we serve as the group that goes out and brings those groups in.
Okay. Have you been out to Hensel Park yet?
I haven't, but I know exactly where it is because I know the development on University.
Oh, that's right. Okay. I think we can do hard things, Mark. We can do hard things, right? I would love to see what our sister entities have to say about this, and I would love to see us have some engagement with them to see if we can come together with something that would benefit everyone. I don't think I had any interest. Actually, I did not have any interest in pursuing anything with a convention center until you guys came on with this vision of being able to tie everyone together and everyone really feeling like they have opportunity to be an equal partner in it. It's I think that's the only place it can happen. I think that having those partners are vitally critical. What is the lead time on, like, say, the pre-development piece of it? Like, if you sit down, how long do you think it would typically take to iron out those relationships and figure out kind of how things might work? Is that fast, slow?
Never fast. OU, we've been working on it for 10 years, but a lot of that has been funding related until we really honed in on what the key financing tool that was going to be used. Typically to start an engagement like this in the pre-development, I'd say it's a year to where you really know what the vision and the project is and what all those economics are. You have some early drawings, you have some early cost estimates, you have a good idea from bond council what it's going to look like. You have a lease, a hypothetical lease that's been discussed with individual tenants. So it takes a little bit of time.
I would also like to see our tourism group involved in this heavily as well, not just Econ Dev. If we move forward, these are the guys that really kind of had the vision for the beginning of this, and I don't want to see them skipped over and go directly to Econ Dev if we can do that. Do you guys have any experience working with the hot tax that's available through the state grants?
We do.
Okay.
I've worked on most of the hot tax projects up in Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio.
Are those typically pretty generous? How does that work?
Well,
I know that they exist. I'm not sure how they work.
The Brimer bill is specific on population, and it's obviously driven towards the larger markets. That's why you see Dallas, San Antonio, and Austin and Houston doing $2 billion convention center renovations, because they're recapturing hotel taxes from the state. But we do have, background with that.
Is that something you think we could pursue in this case?
I'd have to look at it. The Brimer bill probably is not specific to College Station, but I do think, recapture some of those dollars could be critical, and you could be done.
Thank you.
Are there any other wrap-up comments, Mr. Yancey? Anything further without going into the 1,000 questions?
Yeah, it was mentioned earlier, I think by William. I think one of the questions we're going to have to answer, and I think I know the answer to it relative to Reed Arena. This isn't just a basketball facility, number one. And number two, aren't there restrictions in, to use the word again that the mayor brought up, the monetization of a facility like that when it's on a land grant, university's land? Don't they hit up against government accounting principles to where they can't reap the full fiscal benefit of the facility as it sits there, and thus that's leading to these things happening where under dirt leases like Century Square and where the improvements are owned separately, or do I have that wrong?
You know what, I don't know, but I can tell you that a lot of times the universities tend not to be able to generate the revenue, the commercial side of revenue that the private side typically does, because that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And typically their mission is not driven around revenue optimization. It's about the, academic and athletic experience.
And for example, the Longhorns had a nice venue for their basketball team, and now they have the Moody Center, and they have 70 concerts a year in it, or however many.
And that was driven out of the need for the land. The medical campus needed that spot to grow.
And ostensibly, the University of Oklahoma had a hard court sports facility, and yet they're now building a new venue.
They're looking to go off campus with a building that's in the middle of a 100-acre mixed-use development.
So would I be fair in saying you can't really look at it as a basketball arena because, again, that's just one tenant, and this industry has changed so much, and the programming requirements and the architectural design standards have basically outpaced days gone by when universities were building these sports arenas for X number of events, and boom, we're done, we're out.
Yeah, I think it's critical that it be multi-purpose. We'd be focusing on the concerts as much as we would the tenant events.
And Hunden told us that too. They said definitely a multi-purpose facility.
I'd say that's accurate.
Great. Yeah, I'm very supportive, have been for 2 or 3 years. I think we need to look at it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schaefer, any further comments? Any further comments from here? I'm going to give one more opportunity for Hunter to come forward. A man with a lot of passion and a lot of experience and a very involved citizen of the community. You asked a question early on. Does the city have an interest? It won't happen if the city and the university don't get together along with the other partners. Have you got any reservations about that? I think the city is prepared to work towards this without very many reservations, except for the fact that it's got to be funded, and it's got to have a good governance system, and so on and so forth. Any last words you have?
No, thank you, Mayor. I would hope in my deepest core that A&M would have an interest. I'm going to deviate for 2 seconds and direct my comment to Councilman Wright. I thought this was interesting, and I was doing everything I could to restrain myself to not run up here and answer this. But the Cowtown Coliseum in the Fort Worth Stockyards was built in 1908. It's been in existence for 117 years. It was operated by the city of Fort Worth up until about 2021, where ASM Global was brought in, the parent company that they have now acquired. It never turned a profit in 113 years. ASM Global took it over. It's got challenges, HVAC mechanical issues, dirt floor. First year, the deal that was cut by Majestic was a percentage of revenue would be returned, anything above the operating cost coverage, so essentially EBITDA earnings. The city got a check for $1 million in year one, and this year I'm pretty sure it was over $2 million that was returned back to the city of Fort Worth. So the reason I bring that up is what Bob was alluding to is UBIT, unrelated business income tax, is the reason Reed was built was at the mission and vision of serving an institution, and they're in the business of academics. You looked at today and caught a very important word, Mayor, monetization. This is going to be built to be a for-profit endeavor. And now I'll weave my comment to Councilman Smith. And I say this, I'm going to be like a salesman where when my sales guys say things, I want to wring their neck. I'm going to be a little bit like that in what I'm about to say, is I think, in my humble opinion, what is so core to this project being successful, and a little bit also directed as Councilman Schaefer, is not to be Pollyanna in this, but I have sat in rooms and listened to things about esports for years. I've sat in rooms and listened to, when Dr. Banks was our president, a performing arts center. I think that a building that can handle a diverse mix of uses that will not just satisfy those of us that are rabid and crazy college football fans, but some of us also, I'm not embarrassed to say this, my wife has got me to go to many plays in my life, and I actually really like them. So I think having a diverse mix of business is necessary and germane. And I also think bringing in, and I promised this to Dr. Schaefer, and I want this on the record, that the park piece, and I promised this to Councilman White, I think the park piece is also a major piece of this. We have such a gold mine in Hensel Park that is really completely underutilized for City of Bryan impact, City College Station impact, Brazos County impact, community impact. And if this could be the catalyst to make that into something that's meaningful, that those of us that live here could use 365 days a year, I think we owe it to the citizens and ourselves to do better. And I think this project, if done well and has a diverse mix of business, could be accretive to the community at large, not just to the fan base that loves college athletics. I think that I've given you hopefully a good, vivid example of, while there are buildings that they're functionally obsolete, there is a much different call that is received when it's the largest booker of Live Nation calling a talent versus me or you calling a talent. They don't take our calls, they take their calls. And so lastly, the park piece is very important. So I think if all those things are incorporated into this project, I think it has something that appeals to everybody. And I think the key to this will be that piece. And that adds some complexity, but to Melissa's point, I have faith that we can handle complexity. I have faith that we can think big, and I have faith that we can do something big, and I think we would be foolish to not at least try. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Hunter. Appreciate your being here and appreciate your involvement to bring people forward. Yes.
One last quick question. Thank you for that, by the way. But for the city manager, say this, we work through this together. How does that process work? Is that an RFP eventually in terms of how it works? Can we just go right into this?
So, I mean, one, again, I think the first step is to kind of figure out which partners are on board. And that dictates, yes, there's always legal processes you have to go through. I mean, these guys are as experienced as anybody, I'm sure, in dealing with those. So then we once we got to that point, we'd come back with what the options are for doing that, whether it's just us or it's multi-jurisdictional, and it can be RFPs. There's other ways, you go about those things. But once we figured out kind of what the structure and who was involved, then we could come back and do that. And there's different things you can do in the interim, obviously, to get to different points where the council and other entities can make a decision. So, I mean, we certainly deal on that, and the other folks who are potential partners do all the time. So we'd run that up and then figure out what we thought was the best way to go about it.
May I make one last comment, Mayor?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, please.
I know there's been some concern in our community about things happening behind closed doors, and I just want to point out that this is the first time that this council has heard anything about this. Some of us have heard through the tourism group, but we felt it very important that the community know about this opportunity from the very first step. And I thank y'all for doing it this way. It does give us the ability to be ultimately transparent with our constituents.
Thank you. And Mr. Rhoda, thank you for being here after a very busy weekend that I'm sure you got a little jet lag and maybe didn't get much sleep last night. We really appreciate your being here this afternoon to introduce this larger vision, I guess you might call it, to us, and the experience base of your company and what you bring to the community, and the fact that the community is not a bad place to start either. So we really appreciate what you've brought to us. And Hunter, thank you for the work you've done up to this point. I think I can represent the council, the city manager. This is something we need to talk more about, and I think the council will need to talk more with you about it. But I think you've got some clear direction that, as well as Mr. Ostrowski from Economic Development and Tourism, by the way. He oversees tourism too, so that's encompassed in there. And Mr. Cook's back there. He's listening very carefully, so keep us engaged. And I'd say move forward in trying to build that set of relationships for that, what's ultimately going to be a governance structure, but certainly the partners that have been mentioned here today.
It sounds great. And for the record, I will say, we certainly don't want to run anything like this as a city. happy to be a participant, happy for, there to be a structure in it, but that's not what we do. So this is a good model for us. And I think I'd also say it's been mentioned that the community has looked at convention centers and other things time and time again. It seems like it comes up. And I hope if it works out to where everybody is a partner and this really is what it could be, I hope it's successful. I'm certainly committed to it. But at the very least, what I would tell people who have concerns is this is the type of thing that if we vet this all out and it doesn't work, then we don't have to keep running this thing over and over versus some of the other models that I think were never really set up for success. This is a premier group with a premier opportunity and some incredible potential partners. So I'm excited to take a shot at it. And we'll certainly keep the council and the community involved and start to get our arms around who else is going to be on the team with us on this and go from there.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you, Mayor Gutierrez, for being here. I appreciate your joining us. I think the county judge was here earlier and he had to leave. And I'm sure there's others out there representing other parts of the potential partnership structure. So we thank you all for being here and hearing the presentation. Bill, thank you for doing this. I hope you can get back to at least to Dallas tonight to visit some family. Great. We've got another item on the agenda. Do you need to do a presentation on the Hunden report? Gentlemen, ladies?
Not unless there's any other questions on it.
Very good. In that case, we've certainly heard the presentation before. We all have the final report because it was sent to all of us. So after we read through it, maybe we will want you to come back and provide us some highlights from that. But
Mayor?
yes, sir.
Could I ask one brief question of Mr. Ostrowski?
Sure.
I know the answer to this, but just for clarity's sake, when the Hunden report came back, the final version, did they or did they not identify that this community could sustain a multi-event center and that we were missing out on business opportunities and quality of life opportunities for our citizens as a result of not having one?
So they did indicate that there's a general need for a center and that it could be supported. There were a variety of different funding mechanisms that came into play to make sure that the financing came in line. But when they did their initial review, it was a two-step process. One, they identified the general market, and then phase two of the study, they looked at the various financial components with that. And so going through those financial components, and if the city could secure some of those financing mechanisms, it could be supported.
Thank you, sir.
And that's part of the hard stuff, I think, that Ms. McElhaney was referring to, is getting all of those financing components together. But that's something I think we can do, and I think we've got the location, certainly the enthusiasm of some of the folks here in the community. I hope we can build on that. Thank you all very much. With that, I would declare this meeting adjourned.